It's a story we see in the business world all the time. A massive company, seemingly untouchable, suddenly collapses under its own weight. But what happens when that story isn't about a corporation, but a church? A megachurch with thousands of members, sprawling campuses, and a global reach, suddenly facing financial ruin. It's a jarring thought because we often associate size with success and success with God's blessing. But the reality is, even the largest and most influential churches are not immune to the principles of wisdom, accountability, and stewardship. When these foundations crack, even the most impressive structures can come crumbling down. Hello and welcome to the channel. Today, we're tackling a difficult but important topic: the financial collapse of megachurches. Before we go any further, I want to be very clear about our purpose. This is not about mocking or celebrating the failure of any church or its leaders. The financial collapse of a church does not mean its members have lost their salvation, nor does it negate all the good that may have been done. Our goal here is to learn, to grow in wisdom, and to understand how we can build healthier, more resilient church communities for the future. We're approaching this with humility, seeking to understand, not to judge. The Bible gives us a clear framework for leadership and stewardship. Proverbs 11:14 says, "Where there is no guidance, a people falls, but in an abundance of counselors there is safety." This highlights the need for accountability. Jesus himself spoke about faithfulness in finances in Luke 16, saying, "One who is faithful in a very little is also faithful in much. If then you have not been faithful in the unrighteous wealth, who will entrust to you the true riches?" And Paul lays out the qualifications for church leaders in 1 Timothy 3, emphasizing integrity, self-control, and good management of one's own household as prerequisites for managing God's household. The core principle is stewardship. Leaders are caretakers, not owners of God's resources. With that foundation, let's examine the stories of 5 megachurches that, for various reasons, faced financial collapse. Our first example is the Crystal Cathedral in Garden Grove, California. Founded by Robert H. Schuller, it became an icon of the televangelism movement. The church was famous for its stunning all-glass architecture and its weekly Hour of Power broadcast, which at its peak reached millions worldwide. Schuller's message was one of possibility thinking, and the church grew into a massive ministry with a large campus and numerous programs. The downfall, however, was a slow burn, rooted in massive debt and a difficult leadership transition. The cathedral itself, completed in 1980, cost over $20 million, a huge sum at the time. Over the years, the ministry accumulated more and more debt to fund its expansion and lavish productions. When the 2008 financial crisis hit, donations plummeted. The church could no longer service its debt, which had ballooned to over $50 million. In 2010, the Crystal Cathedral Ministries filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. The iconic building was eventually sold to the Roman Catholic Diocese of Orange. The impact was devastating for longtime members who had poured their lives and finances into the ministry. The lesson here is a stark reminder about the dangers of debt. Proverbs 22:7 tells us, "The borrower is slave to the lender, building God's kingdom on a mountain of debt creates a fragile foundation that can be washed away by the first economic storm." Next, we look at Mars Hill Church in Seattle, Washington. Led by its charismatic and controversial pastor, Mark Driscoll, Mars Hill grew from a small Bible study in 1996 to a multi-site megachurch with 15 locations across 5 states and over 13,000 in weekly attendance. Driscoll was known for his bold, confrontational preaching style, which attracted a large following, particularly among young men. However, the church's rapid growth was accompanied by a culture of top-down, authoritarian leadership. Allegations of plagiarism, financial mismanagement related to book sales, and a pattern of spiritual abuse and intimidation against staff and members began to surface. Key leaders and elders resigned, citing concerns about Driscoll's leadership style. The controversy reached a tipping point in 2014, leading to Driscoll's resignation. Without its central figure, and with its reputation severely damaged, the entire church network dissolved just a few months later. All of its properties were sold off. The collapse left thousands of members spiritually disoriented and hurt. The story of Mars Hill is a powerful lesson in the importance of plural leadership and accountability. A celebrity pastor model, where one person holds immense power and influence, is incredibly risky and unbiblical. The Bible promotes a model of shared leadership through a council of elders who can provide correction, wisdom, and mutual accountability. Our third case is the New Birth Missionary Baptist Church in Georgia, once led by the late Bishop Eddie Long. Under his leadership, the church grew to over 25,000 members and was a powerhouse in the community, known for its extensive social programs. Bishop Long was a prominent and influential figure. However, in 2010, the church was rocked by a major scandal involving allegations of misconduct against Long. The ensuing legal battles and media storm led to a significant decline in membership and donations. While the church did not file for bankruptcy during this period, it faced severe financial strain, reportedly selling off its private jet and other assets to stay afloat. After Bishop Long's passing in 2017, the church continued to struggle with leadership transitions and a reduced congregation. This story highlights the profound impact that a leader's personal integrity has on the health of the entire church. 1 Timothy 3 is clear that a church leader must be above reproach. When a leader's moral authority is compromised, it erodes trust, and trust is the currency of any healthy community, especially a church. The financial and relational fallout can be immense. Fourth, we consider the Eagle's Nest Cathedral in suburban Atlanta, founded by Bishop Earl Polk. In the 1980s and 90s, this church was a thriving ministry known for its progressive, ecumenical message. It grew to have thousands of members and operated a K-12 school. However, like New Birth, the ministry was shattered by a series of devastating scandals in the late 1990s and early 2000s. Allegations of sexual and financial misconduct against Bishop Polk and other family members and leadership led to years of lawsuits, public disgrace, and a mass exodus of members. The church's finances dwindled as attendance plummeted and legal fees mounted. The school closed, and the church, once a megachurch, shrank to a small fraction of its former size. The name was eventually changed to the Cathedral at Chapel Hill to distance itself from the past. The tragic lesson from Eagle's Nest is about the danger of a lack of institutional governance. When a church is run more like a family business than a spiritual body with proper oversight, it creates an environment where abuse and financial mismanagement can go unchecked. Healthy churches have independent boards and financial accountability structures that are not controlled by a single person or family. Finally, let's look at the revival movement in Brownsville, Florida, specifically the Brownsville Assembly of God, from 1995 to 2000. This church was the epicenter of a massive revival that drew over 4 million people from around the world. The church experienced explosive growth, holding services almost every night of the week. To accommodate the crowds and the new ministry school that sprang up, the church took on significant debt to expand its facilities. However, revivals, by their nature, are seasons. When the intense focus on Brownsville began to wane and key leaders of the revival moved on, the crowds disappeared, and so did the income. The church was left with a massive campus and crushing debt it could no longer sustain. By 2002, they were forced to lay off staff and restructure their finances to avoid foreclosure. Unlike the others, this wasn't primarily a story of moral scandal, but one of what could be called poor strategic planning. The lesson is about the difference between a moment and a movement. It's easy to get caught up in a powerful season of God's moving and assume it will last forever. But wise leadership plans for the long term. They build sustainably, understanding that seasons change. They are faithful stewards not just in times of plenty, but also in preparing for times when resources may be leaner. So, what are the common threads we see in these stories? A few patterns emerge. First, the danger of a celebrity pastor culture that elevates one person above accountability. Second, the crushing weight of debt, often taken on for ambitious building projects. Third, a lack of independent governance and financial transparency. And fourth, the devastating fallout from leadership scandals. So what does healthy church leadership look like? It looks like a team of humble servant leaders. Not a solitary CEO, it looks like a council of elders as described in the New Testament. It looks like financial transparency, where members can see how their tithes and offerings are being managed. It looks like a budget that prioritizes ministry and people over lavish buildings and lifestyles. It's a culture where accountability is not seen as a threat, but as a God-given protection for both the leaders and the congregation. In the end, it's crucial to remember this. The church, with a capital C, is not a building, a brand, or a pastor. The church is the body of Christ, his people. Institutions may fail, buildings may be sold, and leaders may fall. But the true church, founded on the rock of Jesus Christ, will endure. God's work is not ultimately dependent on our grandest structures or most famous personalities. He is a God of redemption, able to bring good out of even the most painful failures. Our hope is not in the stability of a megachurch, but in the faithfulness of our unchanging God. Thank you for joining me for this challenging but necessary conversation. If you found this reflection helpful, please give the video a like and subscribe to the channel for more content that seeks to apply timeless biblical wisdom to our modern world. I'd love to read your thoughts in the comments below. Please share them with grace and respect for one another. Thanks for watching.